Millionaire took his single-mom neighbor to a gala. Her witty reply to his ex-wife stunned everyone. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. She thought she had escaped. Charlotte Devereaux, the billionaire tech genius who revolutionized cloud security, had vanished into suburban anonymity. Dyed hair, new name, modest townhouse. Nobody would ever suspect that Khloe Martinez, the quiet single mother next door, once commanded boardrooms and built empires. But when her reclusive neighbor Bruce Sterling desperately needs a date for the charity gala that could save his reputation, Charlotte faces an impossible choice. Accept his invitation and risk exposure, or watch a good man suffer for her cowardice. She never expected his venomous ex-wife to attack her with such calculated cruelty. She never imagined that defending him would require revealing her true self. And she certainly never anticipated that 3 words, Madame Devereaux, would shatter her carefully constructed world forever. Sometimes the most dangerous mask is the one we wear to hide our power. Good morning, Bruce. Charlotte Martinez looked up from her coffee cup as her neighbor emerged from the house next door, his dark hair still damp from the shower. Even at 7:30 in the morning, he carried himself with the precise posture of a man accustomed to command, though she had noticed the slight stoop in his shoulders that spoke of recent burdens. Morning, Khloe. His voice held that particular warmth reserved for the few people who had earned his trust over the past 2 months. You are up early again. She gestured toward the small laptop balanced on her knees. Client deadline. The joys of freelance graphic design. Everyone wants their logo yesterday. The lie came easily now, polished by repetition. In truth, she'd been awake since 5, reviewing quarterly reports from her investment portfolio. Old habits died hard, especially when those habits had built a $2.8 billion empire. Bruce leaned against the low fence that separated their modest front yards. I keep telling you, you work too hard. When was the last time you took a real break? When was the last time you took one? She countered, noting the tired lines around his steel blue eyes. I saw your office light on until nearly midnight again. Touché. He smiled, and for a moment the exhaustion lifted from his features. Sterling Industries does not run itself, unfortunately. Especially not when your CEO spent the better part of last year learning how to be human again. Charlotte tilted her head slightly. In their careful morning conversations, Bruce had never directly mentioned his divorce, though she had pieced together the broad strokes from overheard phone calls and neighborhood gossip. The previous resident had been eager to share details about the poor man next door whose wife had left him for a younger venture capitalist. You seem plenty human to me, she said softly. Thank you for that. His expression grew serious. Actually, I wanted to ask you something. Are you free tomorrow evening? Charlotte felt a small flutter of anticipation mixed with alarm. Over the past 8 weeks, their relationship had settled into a comfortable rhythm of morning coffee conversations and occasional shared dinners when her son, Ethan, was at sleepovers. She had grown to appreciate Bruce's quiet intelligence and unexpected gentleness, especially in his interactions with Ethan, but she had also been careful to maintain appropriate boundaries. That depends on what you have in mind, she replied, keeping her tone light. Bruce ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking younger and more vulnerable. There is a charity gala tomorrow night. The Children's Hospital Foundation, Sterling Industries, is a major sponsor, and I'm expected to attend. He paused, clearly struggling with the words. I was wondering if you might consider accompanying me. The simple request sent a shock of panic through Charlotte's carefully maintained composure. A charity gala meant photographers, society reporters, and exactly the kind of high-profile exposure she had spent the last 8 months avoiding. It also meant the strong possibility of running into someone from her former life in the tech industry. "Bruce, I appreciate the invitation, but I'm not sure I'm the right person. Please." The word came out more forcefully than he had intended. He took a breath and continued more quietly. "I know it is a lot to ask. The truth is, my ex-wife will be there. Vivian moves in those circles, and she has made it clear that she considers my social isolation to be evidence of my general inadequacy. I would rather not give her the satisfaction of seeing me alone again." Charlotte studied his face, seeing the genuine vulnerability beneath his carefully controlled exterior. This was not a man who asked for help easily. The protective instinct that had driven so many of her business decisions suddenly flared to life. What exactly would this involve? Dinner, dancing, the usual charity auction nonsense. "You would be my guest, nothing more. I would cover everything. Dress, accessories, whatever you need. I know money is tight with the freelance work." He hesitated. "I realize this is presumptuous, but I have seen you with Ethan. You have natural grace, and you are certainly intelligent enough to hold your own in any conversation. I would be honored to have you there." Charlotte felt her heart constrict. If only he knew that she had attended dozens of similar events in her previous life, that she had been the keynote speaker at tech conferences from San Francisco to Singapore. The irony was almost painful. "I would need to arrange childcare for Ethan," she said slowly. "Of course, I can recommend a service, or if you prefer someone you know." "No, I have someone in mind." Charlotte's thoughts raced. Mrs. Patterson from 3 houses down had been eager to babysit, and Ethan was comfortable with her. The real question was whether she could risk exposure at such a public event. But looking at Bruce's hopeful expression, she found herself nodding. "All right, I will go with you." Relief flooded his features. "Thank you. I promise you will not regret this." As Charlotte watched him return to his house with a lighter step, she wondered if she would regret it. The old Charlotte Devereaux had never backed down from a challenge, had never let fear dictate her choices. Perhaps it was time to remember that strength, even if she had to hide its true source. She closed her laptop and headed inside, where Ethan was already dressed for school, his backpack slung over one shoulder. "Morning, Mom." Was that Mr. Sterling? Her 8-year-old son had developed a serious case of hero worship for their neighbor, who had patiently taught him to throw a baseball and never seemed to mind his endless questions about business. "Yes, sweetheart. He invited me to a fancy dinner tomorrow night. You will stay with Mrs. Patterson." Ethan's eyes widened. Like a date. Charlotte felt heat rise in her cheeks. Like a friend helping another friend. Nothing more. "But you like him, right? I can tell." Sometimes her son's perceptiveness was both a blessing and a curse. "I like him as a neighbor and friend. Now eat your breakfast or you will be late for school." As Ethan dutifully returned to his cereal, Charlotte stared out the kitchen window at Bruce's house. She did like him more than she had expected to like anyone in her new life. He was kind without being weak, intelligent without being arrogant, and he treated her with a respect that had nothing to do with her net worth or professional accomplishments. For the first time in 8 months, she felt truly torn between the safety of her disguise and the possibility of genuine connection with another person. Tomorrow night would test just how far she was willing to go to protect both. Charlotte stood in front of her bedroom mirror, turning slowly to examine her appearance from every angle. The simple black dress she had chosen from her carefully curated closet looked appropriate for a charity gala, but she found herself second-guessing everything from the neckline to the hemline. In her previous life, she had employed a stylist who handled such decisions. Now she was on her own, trying to strike the impossible balance between fitting in and standing out. The doorbell rang at exactly 7 o'clock. Bruce's punctuality was one of the many small things she had grown to appreciate about him. She grabbed her clutch purse and headed downstairs, where Ethan was already opening the door. "Wow, Mr. Sterling, you look really fancy," Ethan announced with the unfiltered honesty of childhood. "Thank you, Ethan." "I feel fancy." Bruce's attention shifted to Charlotte as she reached the bottom of the stairs, and she saw something flicker in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or appreciation. "Khloe, you look beautiful." The compliment sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." He did, indeed. The black tuxedo emphasized his lean frame and broad shoulders, while the formal wear seemed to restore some of the natural authority that casual clothes had diminished. For the first time, she glimpsed the CEO he must be in his professional life. "Mrs. Patterson should be here any minute," Charlotte said, checking her watch. "I left her number on the refrigerator, along with emergency contacts and—" "Mom! You already told me 3 times!" "I will be fine." Ethan rolled his eyes with the dramatic patience of an 8-year-old. "Just go have fun on your not date." Bruce chuckled. "Your son has excellent timing. I see headlights in the driveway." The next few minutes passed in a blur of final instructions and reassurances. Charlotte kissed Ethan goodbye and allowed Bruce to escort her to his car, a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. As they pulled away from the neighborhood, she felt a familiar knot of anxiety in her stomach. "Are you nervous?" Bruce asked, glancing over at her. "A little," she admitted. "It has been a while since I attended anything this formal." "You will be fine. Just be yourself." If only he knew how impossible that advice was. Charlotte Devereaux could work a room full of tech executives and venture capitalists without breaking a sweat. But Khloe Martinez had to be more careful, more restrained. She had to remember to ask questions about industries she knew intimately, to appear impressed by accomplishments that paled next to her own. "Tell me about the charity," she said, partly to distract herself and partly because she genuinely wanted to know. "The Children's Hospital Foundation. They fund medical research and provide support for families who cannot afford treatment. Sterling Industries has been a sponsor for 5 years." His voice took on a warmer tone. "I lost my grandfather to cancer when I was 12. He spent his final months in that hospital, and the staff there became like family to us. It is important to me that other families have the same support." Charlotte felt another piece of the puzzle that was Bruce Sterling fall into place. Beneath the successful businessman was a man driven by genuine compassion and loyalty. It was exactly the kind of character trait that had always attracted her, and exactly the kind of thing that made her current deception feel more complicated. "That is wonderful," she said softly. "I am honored to be there with you." The hotel ballroom was everything Charlotte had expected: crystal chandeliers, white-clothed tables, and well-dressed couples moving through the space with the practiced ease of people accustomed to such events. Bruce kept a protective hand on her lower back as they navigated the crowd, making introductions and engaging in the kind of polite conversation that served as social currency in these circles. "Bruce, there you are." A woman in an elegant navy gown approached them with a warm smile. "I was beginning to think you had changed your mind about attending." "Margaret, good to see you. I would like you to meet my friend Khloe Martinez." "Khloe, this is Margaret Davidson, president of the Hospital Foundation." Charlotte shook the woman's hand, noting the slight assessment in her eyes. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Davidson. Bruce has told me wonderful things about the Foundation's work. Please call me Margaret, and you must tell me about yourself, Khloe. I do not believe we have met before. I am a graphic designer, freelance work, mostly small businesses and non-profits." The practiced response rolled off her tongue smoothly. "I recently moved to the area." "How lovely. And how did you and Bruce meet?" "We are neighbors," Bruce interjected with a slight smile. "Khloe moved in next door about 2 months ago. Best thing that has happened to the neighborhood in years." Charlotte felt heat rise in her cheeks at the compliment. "He is just being kind. I am the one who is lucky to have such a good neighbor." Margaret beamed at them both. How refreshing to see genuine affection. So many couples at these events seem to be going through the motions. She leaned closer conspiratorially. "Speaking of which, I should warn you that Vivian Sterling is here tonight. She has been making rather pointed comments about Bruce's social calendar." Charlotte felt Bruce tense beside her. "I appreciate the warning, Margaret. Just remember, the best response to small-minded people is to live well and be happy." Margaret patted Charlotte's arm. "You seem like exactly what he needs, dear. Now shall we find your table?" As they followed Margaret through the crowd, Charlotte found herself scanning the room automatically, looking for potential threats to her cover. It was a habit from her previous life, when a single photograph in the wrong publication could impact stock prices or merger negotiations. Tonight, the stakes felt even higher. "There!" Bruce's voice was tight with tension. The blonde woman in the red dress, talking to the tall man in the grey suit. Charlotte followed his gaze to a strikingly beautiful woman who commanded attention with the kind of practiced poise that came from years of privilege. Even from across the room, Vivian Sterling radiated the confidence of someone who had never doubted her place in the world. "She is very beautiful," Charlotte said neutrally. "Yes, she is. She is also calculating, ambitious, and utterly ruthless when she feels threatened." Bruce's jaw tightened. "I apologize in advance for whatever she might say to you tonight." Charlotte turned to face him fully, noting the genuine concern in his eyes. "Bruce, I can handle myself. I have dealt with difficult people before. I know you are strong, Khloe. But Vivian fights dirty, and she will see you as competition, whether you are or not." The protective note in his voice sent another flutter of warmth through her chest. When was the last time someone had worried about her ability to handle a social situation? In her previous life, she had been the one doing the protecting, the one making sure her employees and business partners were safe from corporate predators. "Then we will just have to make sure she knows I am not intimidated," Charlotte replied, with a smile that held more confidence than Khloe Martinez should possess. As they approached their assigned table, Charlotte caught sight of their reflection in one of the ballroom's mirrors. They looked good together, Bruce's dark formality complementing her understated elegance. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to attend such events as herself, to stand beside him as an equal rather than playing a role. The fantasy was dangerous, but as Bruce pulled out her chair and she felt his hand brush briefly against her shoulder, Charlotte found herself wondering if the risk might be worth it. Dinner passed in a pleasant blur of conversation and carefully orchestrated charity presentations. Charlotte found herself genuinely enjoying the company at their table, a mix of business leaders and philanthropists who shared Bruce's commitment to meaningful causes. She contributed to discussions about community development and educational initiatives, drawing on her own experiences while being careful not to reveal too much specialized knowledge. "You have interesting insights into non-profit funding," commented Dr. James Morrison, the hospital's chief administrator. "Have you worked with many charitable organizations?" "Some," Charlotte replied carefully. "I find that small businesses and non-profits often have the most creative approaches to problem solving. They have to be resourceful." "Exactly," Bruce said, his voice carrying a note of pride. "Khloe has a gift for seeing solutions that others miss. She helped me rethink our company's approach to employee wellness programs." Charlotte felt a moment of panic. She had made a casual suggestion about flexible work arrangements during one of their morning conversations, drawing on her own experience implementing similar policies at DevTech Solutions. She had not realized he was taking her advice so seriously. "Oh, that was just common sense," she said quickly. "I am sure you would have reached the same conclusions." "You are too modest," Margaret Davidson interjected from across the table. "Good ideas are rare in any field." "You should be proud of your insights." Before Charlotte could respond, the lights dimmed and the evening's program began. She settled back in her chair, grateful for the reprieve from questions about her background. The auction portion of the evening proceeded smoothly, with Bruce making generous bids on several items, including a weekend at a Napa Valley vineyard and a set of premium golf clubs. "Planning to take up golf?" Charlotte asked quietly as the bidding concluded. "Planning to donate them back to next year's auction," he replied with a grin. "The point is supporting the cause, not acquiring more possessions." It was exactly the kind of response she would have expected from him, and it reinforced her growing conviction that Bruce Sterling was genuinely one of the good ones. The thought made her current deception feel even more complicated. As the formal program concluded and the dancing began, Bruce offered her his hand. "Shall we?" Charlotte allowed him to lead her onto the dance floor, where couples were beginning to sway to the soft jazz provided by a small orchestra. Bruce's hand settled naturally at her waist while she placed her fingers on his shoulder, and they began to move together with surprising ease. "You dance well," she observed. "Boarding school?" He replied with a slight grimace. "Mandatory cotillion classes. I hated every minute of it at the time, but I suppose it serves a purpose now. I can imagine 12-year-old Bruce rebelling against dance lessons. 15, actually. And yes, I was appropriately mortified by the entire experience." His expression grew more serious. "What about you? Where did you learn to dance?" Another careful navigation around the truth. "My grandmother. She insisted that every young lady should know how to waltz properly." It was true, though she had also taken additional lessons in college and had danced at dozens of corporate events over the years. Smart woman. I would have liked to meet her. She would have liked you too. She had a weakness for men who opened doors and pulled out chairs. They continued to dance in comfortable silence, and Charlotte found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the music and the warmth of Bruce's presence. For the first time in months, she felt genuinely at peace, as if the constant vigilance required to maintain her disguise could be temporarily set aside. The feeling lasted exactly 3 minutes and 27 seconds. "Bruce, darling, what a surprise to see you here." The voice cut through the music and conversation like a blade through silk. Charlotte felt Bruce's entire body tense as they turned to face a woman in a stunning red gown that probably cost more than most people's monthly salaries. Vivian Sterling was even more beautiful up close, with the kind of polished perfection that came from excellent genes and unlimited resources. Her platinum blonde hair was arranged in an elaborate updo that showcased diamond earrings, and her makeup was flawless despite the late hour. But it was her eyes that held Charlotte's attention. Pale blue and calculating, with the predatory focus of a woman who viewed every interaction as a potential conquest or threat. "Vivian." Bruce's voice was carefully neutral. "I hope you are enjoying the evening." "Oh, I always do. The foundation does such important work." Her gaze shifted to Charlotte with surgical precision. "And you must be Bruce's mystery companion. How lovely to finally meet you." "Khloe Martinez," Charlotte replied, extending her hand. "The pleasure is mine." Vivian's handshake was brief and just firm enough to establish dominance without appearing rude. "Khloe, such an interesting name. Are you from the area originally?" "I moved here recently. I'm a graphic designer." How creative! And where did you and Bruce meet? Charlotte felt the weight of the question, recognizing it as the opening move in what would likely be a lengthy interrogation. We are neighbors. Bruce has been very welcoming. I am sure he has. Vivian's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Bruce has always been so helpful to people who need assistance. It is one of his most endearing qualities. The casual cruelty of the comment hit its mark. Charlotte felt Bruce's hand tighten on her waist, and she could practically see his internal debate about whether to respond. Before he could say anything, she stepped slightly forward, her own smile never wavering. "How thoughtful of you to know him so well," Charlotte said pleasantly. "It must be comforting to maintain such a close relationship with your former husband." Vivian's eyes narrowed slightly, but her expression remained perfectly composed. "We share many mutual friends. It would be impossible to avoid each other entirely." She paused, her gaze sweeping over Charlotte's dress with barely concealed assessment. "That is a lovely gown, by the way. It is so refreshing to see someone make such an effort with off-the-rack pieces." Charlotte felt the insult land like a physical blow, but she kept her expression neutral. In her previous life, she had faced down hostile takeover attempts and aggressive media interviews. She could certainly handle one bitter ex-wife. "Thank you," she replied smoothly. "I have always believed that confidence is the best accessory." How true. Though I have noticed that good tailoring certainly does not hurt. Vivian's attention turned back to Bruce. "I was just telling the Hendersons about that wonderful trip we took to Tuscany. Do you remember that little vineyard we discovered? I should give you the name. I am sure you would enjoy it." The message was clear. "I know him in ways you never will." Charlotte felt a surprising surge of protective anger on Bruce's behalf. Whatever their marriage had been, it was over, and Vivian had no right to use their shared history as a weapon. "That sounds lovely," Charlotte said before Bruce could respond. "Bruce was just telling me about his interest in wine. I'm sure he would appreciate the recommendation." Of course he would. Bruce has always been so eager to learn about the finer things in life. Vivian's smile was razor sharp. I suppose that comes from his rather modest background. Not everyone grows up surrounded by culture and refinement. The attack was so smoothly delivered that it took Charlotte a moment to recognize its full impact. Vivian was not just insulting Bruce's origins. She was suggesting that Charlotte was equally lacking in sophistication and breeding. It was a masterful display of social warfare, designed to make both of them feel small and inadequate. Charlotte felt something cold and dangerous unfurl in her chest. This was exactly the kind of behavior she had spent years learning to combat in corporate environments. The difference was that tonight, she was supposed to be vulnerable, supposed to be intimidated by displays of wealth and status. But as she watched Bruce's jaw tighten with suppressed anger, Charlotte realized that some battles were worth fighting regardless of the personal cost. "How interesting," she said, her voice carrying a note of steel that would have been familiar to anyone who had negotiated with DevTech solutions. "I have always found that true refinement comes from treating others with kindness and respect. But perhaps we have different definitions of culture." The words hung in the air like a challenge, and for the first time since approaching them, Vivian looked genuinely surprised. Her perfect composure cracked slightly, revealing the calculating intelligence beneath. "Indeed," she said slowly. "How philosophical of you, Khloe. I suppose when one lacks certain advantages, one must develop alternative perspectives." Charlotte felt Bruce tense beside her, and she knew he was about to say something that would only escalate the situation. Instead, she placed her hand gently on his arm and smiled at Vivian with genuine warmth. "You are absolutely right. I have been fortunate to learn from many different kinds of people. It has given me a deep appreciation for authenticity." She paused, her eyes meeting Vivian's directly. I find that the most interesting people are often the ones who have something meaningful to contribute beyond their bank accounts. It was a perfectly polite statement that somehow managed to be devastating in its implications. Vivian's smile became rigid, and Charlotte could see the moment when she realized that her usual tactics were not having their intended effect. "How refreshing," Vivian said finally. "I do hope you will excuse me. I see some friends I must speak with. Enjoy the rest of your evening." As Vivian glided away, Charlotte felt the tension slowly drain from Bruce's body. They stood in silence for a moment, both processing what had just occurred. "That was impressive," Bruce said quietly. "I have never seen anyone handle Vivian quite so effectively." "I do not like bullies," Charlotte replied simply. "And I especially do not like bullies who attack good people." Bruce turned to face her fully, and she saw something new in his expression, a mixture of admiration and curiosity that made her pulse quicken. "There is more to you than meets the eye, is there not, as Khloe Martinez?" The question was casual, but Charlotte heard the deeper current beneath it. Bruce was intelligent and observant, and she had just revealed more of her true nature than was wise. The smart thing would be to deflect, to return to the safe persona she had constructed. Instead, she found herself smiling with genuine warmth. "I suppose we all have hidden depths, Bruce Sterling. The question is whether we find people worth revealing them to." As they returned to the dance floor, Charlotte realized that her carefully constructed walls were beginning to crack. The question was whether she would have the courage to let them fall completely, or whether the fear of exposure would ultimately drive her back into hiding. Either way, she knew that tonight had changed something fundamental between them. The only question was whether that change would ultimately prove to be a blessing or a catastrophe. The drive home passed in thoughtful silence, both of them processing the evening's events. Charlotte stared out the passenger window at the darkened neighborhoods, her mind replaying every moment of her confrontation with Vivian Sterling. She had revealed more of her true self than was wise, but watching Bruce's ex-wife attempt to diminish him had triggered protective instincts she had thought safely buried. "You were magnificent tonight," Bruce said finally, breaking the comfortable quiet. "I have never seen anyone stand up to Vivian with such grace." "She was testing boundaries," Charlotte replied, careful to keep her voice neutral. "Some people mistake kindness for weakness. It is important to correct that misunderstanding. Most people would have been intimidated by her. She has a reputation for being rather formidable in social situations." Charlotte turned to study his profile in the dashboard light. "Are you asking me why I was not intimidated? I suppose I am curious about where you developed such confidence. It is not something typically associated with freelance graphic designers." The observation was astute and potentially dangerous. Charlotte felt the familiar tension of maintaining her cover story while being drawn toward honesty. "My grandmother taught me to never let anyone make me feel small. She said that bullies only have the power we give them." Wise woman. "What else did she teach you?" "That intelligence is more valuable than beauty, that integrity is more important than wealth, and that the measure of a person is how they treat those who cannot help them in return." All true, though her grandmother had died when Charlotte was 12, long before she had developed the skills that would later serve her in corporate boardrooms. "She sounds like someone I would have admired." "She would have liked you too." She had excellent judgment about character. They pulled into Bruce's driveway, and he turned off the engine. For a moment, neither of them moved, both reluctant to end the evening. "Would you like to come in for coffee?" he asked. "I realize it is late, but I am not quite ready for the evening to end." Charlotte felt a flutter of anticipation mixed with caution. Accepting his invitation would mean extending their time together, deepening whatever connection was developing between them. It would also mean more opportunities for her carefully constructed persona to slip. "I should check on Ethan," she said finally, "but perhaps we could sit on your porch for a few minutes." Bruce's smile was warm and understanding. Perfect compromise. His front porch was furnished with comfortable wicker chairs and a small table, creating an intimate outdoor space that felt separate from the rest of the neighborhood. Charlotte settled into one of the chairs, suddenly aware of how the evening air felt against her skin after the warmth of the ballroom. "Here." Bruce disappeared inside for a moment and returned with a lightweight blanket. "The temperature has dropped." "Thank you." Charlotte accepted the blanket gratefully, wrapping it around her shoulders. The gesture was thoughtful and protective without being presumptuous. Exactly the kind of consideration she had come to expect from him. Bruce settled into the chair beside her, and they sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, both looking out at the quiet street. The neighborhood was peaceful at this hour, with only the occasional car passing by and the soft sounds of crickets in the gardens. "I owe you an apology," Bruce said finally. "For what?" "For exposing you to Vivian's cruelty. I knew she would likely say something unpleasant, but I underestimated how personal she would make it." Charlotte considered her response carefully. "You did not force me to attend with you. I made that choice, knowing there might be difficult moments." "Why did you make that choice, I mean?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that went far beyond the surface meaning. Charlotte felt the weight of his attention, the genuine curiosity in his voice, and realized that this was a moment of truth in more ways than one. "Because you asked me to," she said simply, "and because I could see that it mattered to you." It did matter. More than I probably should have admitted. "Why?" Bruce was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the street ahead. "Because I have spent the last year learning how to be alone. After my divorce, I convinced myself that solitude was preferable to the complications of human connection. But these past 2 months, talking with you, watching you with Ethan, I have remembered what I was missing." Charlotte felt her heart constrict. "Bruce, I am not asking for anything you are not ready to give," he continued quickly. "I know you have your own life, your own priorities, but I want you to know that having you there tonight, standing beside me, meant more than I can adequately express." The sincerity in his voice was almost her undoing. Charlotte had spent months carefully maintaining emotional distance from everyone in her new life, but Bruce's quiet honesty was dismantling her defenses more effectively than any grand gesture could have. "It meant something to me too," she admitted, "more than I expected." "Good, because I would very much like to spend more time with you, if you are amenable." Charlotte felt the familiar war between desire and caution. Every instinct developed over months of careful hiding screamed at her to maintain distance, to protect her secret at all costs. But looking at Bruce's hopeful expression, she found herself nodding. "I would like that too." His smile was radiant in the porch light. "Excellent. Perhaps we could have dinner tomorrow night, somewhere quiet, where we can actually talk without interruption." "I would enjoy that." They sat in comfortable silence again, both processing the shift in their relationship. Charlotte found herself studying Bruce's profile, noting the strong line of his jaw and the way his hair fell across his forehead. In the soft light, he looked younger and more relaxed than she had ever seen him. "I should probably go," she said finally, though she made no move to stand. "Probably," he agreed, also remaining seated. "Ethan will be wondering where I am." "Will he?" Charlotte smiled. "No, he will be fast asleep, but I should still check on him." "Of course." Finally, she stood and handed him the blanket. "Thank you for a lovely evening. And for trusting me with something so important to you." Bruce rose as well, and for a moment they stood close together in the small space. Charlotte was intensely aware of his proximity, of the way he was looking at her with an expression that was both tender and questioning. "Thank you for being exactly what I needed," he said softly. Before she could lose her nerve, Charlotte rose on her tiptoes and pressed a gentle kiss to his cheek. "Good night, Bruce. Good night, Khloe." As she walked the short distance to her own house, Charlotte felt the weight of the evening settling around her like a cloak. She had successfully navigated her first public appearance in 8 months, had defended Bruce against his ex-wife's attacks, and had allowed herself to acknowledge the growing connection between them. She had also revealed more of her true nature than was safe, had made commitments that would be difficult to maintain while preserving her secret, and had taken the first real step toward the kind of relationship that could either heal her wounded heart or shatter it completely. Standing in her own doorway, Charlotte looked back at Bruce's house and saw him still standing on the porch, watching to make sure she got inside safely. The protective gesture sent a warm flutter through her chest, and she waved before disappearing inside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to either deepen their connection or retreat into the safety of her carefully constructed anonymity. But tonight, for the first time in months, Charlotte Devereaux felt genuinely hopeful about the future. The question was whether that hope would survive the complexities of the life she had chosen to live. Charlotte woke the next morning with the peculiar sensation of having lived 2 different lives simultaneously. The evening at the charity gala felt like a dream. The elegant ballroom, the confrontation with Vivian Sterling, the growing intimacy with Bruce, while her modest bedroom and the sound of Ethan getting ready for school represented her current reality. She lay in bed for a few extra minutes, allowing herself to process the events of the previous night. The way Bruce had looked at her when she stood up to his ex-wife, the warmth in his voice when he thanked her for accompanying him, the gentle kiss she had impulsively placed on his cheek, all of it felt significant in ways that both thrilled and terrified her. "Mom, are you awake?" Ethan's voice carried down the hallway, accompanied by the sound of his footsteps on the hardwood floors. "Coming, sweetheart," Charlotte called back, forcing herself to leave the comfort of her bed and return to the familiar routine of morning preparations. She found Ethan in the kitchen, already dressed for school and attempting to pour milk into his cereal bowl with minimal success. "How was your not date?" he asked without looking up from his task. "It was a lovely evening," Charlotte replied, taking the milk carton from him before he could create a larger mess. "How was your time with Mrs. Patterson?" "Fine. She let me stay up an extra hour to watch a movie, and she made really good chocolate chip cookies." Ethan finally looked up at her, his expression suddenly serious. "But I want to know about your evening. Did you have fun? Did Mr. Sterling treat you nice?" Charlotte felt her heart constrict at the protective note in her son's voice. At 8 years old, Ethan had already appointed himself as her guardian, a role that had intensified since their move to Westfield Heights. "He was a perfect gentleman. And yes, I had fun." "Good. I like him. He's not like the other men who used to come around." The casual reference to her previous life sent a chill through Charlotte. In their old world, she had occasionally dated, though her demanding schedule and protective instincts regarding Ethan had limited her relationships to brief, superficial encounters. Most of the men she had met had been more interested in her wealth and status than in her as a person. "What do you mean, sweetheart? He talks to me like I'm a real person, not just some kid he has to be nice to because of you. And he actually listens when I tell him stuff about baseball or school." Ethan spooned cereal into his mouth thoughtfully. "Plus, he makes you smile more." "I smile plenty." "Not like when you are talking to him. It is different." Charlotte found herself without an adequate response. Her 8-year-old son had apparently been conducting his own analysis of her emotional state, and his observations were uncomfortably accurate. "Are you going to see him again?" Ethan continued. We are neighbors, Ethan. Of course I will see him again. You know what I mean, Mom. Charlotte sighed, recognizing that her son had inherited her own directness along with her stubborn streak. He asked me to have dinner with him tonight, just the two of us. Ethan's face lit up. Like a real date this time. Like two friends spending time together, Charlotte corrected, though she knew her son was essentially correct. Last night had changed the dynamic between her and Bruce, moving them from friendly neighbors towards something more substantial. Can I stay with Mrs. Patterson again? I suppose so, if she is available. She is. I already asked her last night if she could babysit again soon, because I could tell you and Mr. Sterling were getting more serious. Charlotte stared at her son, simultaneously impressed by his perceptiveness and alarmed by his presumption. Ethan James Martinez, you did not arrange childcare for a date I had not even agreed to yet. I did not arrange it. I just asked if she was available. There is a difference. Ethan's expression was entirely too innocent for someone who had just demonstrated advanced strategic thinking. You are far too smart for your own good. Grandma Rosa always said, I got that from you. The reference to her grandmother, the woman whose maiden name had provided Charlotte's current identity, sent another wave of complicated emotions through her chest. Ethan had loved Rosa Martinez dearly, and invoking her memory was both comfort and reminder of everything they had left behind. Grandma Rosa was a very wise woman, Charlotte said softly. She would have liked Bruce too. Because he is good to you. Because he is a good man, and because he treats both of us with respect and kindness. Ethan nodded solemnly, as if filing away this information for future reference. I hope you have fun on your real date tonight. It is not, Charlotte began, then stopped. Why was she so resistant to acknowledging what was clearly happening between her and Bruce? Thank you, sweetheart. I hope I do too. After dropping Ethan at school, Charlotte returned home to find Bruce waiting by his mailbox, obviously hoping to catch her. He was dressed for work in a charcoal grey suit that emphasized his lean frame, and his expression was slightly hesitant, as if he was unsure of his reception after the previous evening's intimacy. Good morning, she called out, feeling an unexpected flutter of nervousness. Morning. His smile was warm but cautious. I wanted to thank you again for last night, and to confirm our dinner plans, if you are still interested. I am definitely interested. Ethan has already arranged his own childcare because he apparently has more confidence in my social life than I do. Bruce's laugh was genuine and relieved. Smart boy. I have made reservations at Bella Vista. It is a small Italian place about 20 minutes from here. Very quiet, excellent food, and the kind of place where we can actually have a conversation. It sounds perfect. 7 o'clock work for you? Perfect. They stood looking at each other for a moment, both clearly remembering the way the previous evening had ended. Charlotte felt the same awareness she had experienced on his porch, a sense of anticipation mixed with something deeper and more complex. I should let you get to work, she said finally. Right. Work. Bruce seemed to shake himself back to the present. I will see you tonight, then. I will be ready. As Bruce drove away, Charlotte remained standing in her driveway, watching until his car disappeared around the corner. She was committed now, had agreed to a proper date with a man who was becoming increasingly important to her. The question was whether she could navigate the evening without revealing more about her true identity than was safe. The thought of spending a quiet evening with Bruce, away from the social pressures and potential recognition of the charity gala, filled her with both excitement and trepidation. In a small, intimate restaurant, there would be nowhere to hide if he asked probing questions about her background, or if she inadvertently revealed too much of her business knowledge. But as she returned to her house and settled down to work on her freelance design projects, Charlotte found herself looking forward to the evening with an anticipation that had nothing to do with caution or strategy. For the first time in months, she was genuinely excited about the prospect of being herself, or at least as much of herself as she dared to reveal. The afternoon passed slowly, with Charlotte finding it difficult to concentrate on her work. She kept thinking about Bruce's expression when she had stood up to Vivian, about the warmth in his voice when he thanked her for accompanying him, about the way he had looked at her when he said there was more to her than met the eye. Perhaps it was time to find out just how much more he was ready to discover. Bella Vista was exactly as Bruce had described, intimate, elegant, and blissfully quiet. Charlotte found herself relaxing into the comfortable booth as their server brought wine and disappeared discreetly, leaving them alone in the softly lit corner of the restaurant. The warm ambiance felt like a sanctuary after the previous evening's public scrutiny, and she could see the same relief in Bruce's expression. "This is perfect," she said, looking around at the exposed brick walls and flickering candles. "Thank you for choosing somewhere so peaceful. I thought we could use some privacy after last night's performance." Bruce's eyes held a mixture of admiration and curiosity. "I am still processing how beautifully you handled Vivian. Most people find her rather overwhelming." Charlotte felt a familiar flutter of caution. She was protecting her territory. It is a natural response, even if it is not particularly attractive. Protecting her territory. You were married to her for 5 years. In her mind, you probably still represent security and status, even if she does not want the relationship itself. Charlotte paused, choosing her words carefully. Some people have difficulty distinguishing between love and possession. Bruce set down his wine glass and studied her face. "That is a remarkably insightful analysis. Have you dealt with similar situations before?" The question was casual, but Charlotte heard the deeper current beneath it. Bruce was intelligent and observant, and her response to Vivian had revealed more sophistication than a freelance graphic designer should possess. She needed to deflect without seeming evasive. "I have seen enough human behavior to recognize patterns," she said with a slight smile. "Plus, I have an 8-year-old son who is remarkably skilled at psychological manipulation when he wants something. It teaches you to recognize tactics." Bruce's laugh was genuine. "I suppose parenthood is excellent training for dealing with difficult adults. How are you finding single motherhood?" "Challenging and rewarding in equal measure. Ethan is an amazing kid, but raising him alone requires constant vigilance. I want to protect him from the world's complexities while still preparing him to navigate them. That sounds like an impossible balance. Most days it feels impossible, but then he does something that reminds me why every sacrifice is worth it." Charlotte felt her expression soften. "He has been asking about his father more lately. It is difficult to explain why some people choose not to be part of their children's lives." Bruce's expression grew serious. "What do you tell him? The truth, in age-appropriate terms, that his father was not ready to be a parent and that sometimes adults make choices that have nothing to do with the children involved?" Charlotte paused, surprised by her own openness. "I try to make sure he knows that his father's absence is not a reflection of his worth." "You are doing an excellent job. I can see how much he adores you and how secure he feels in your love." The compliment sent warmth through Charlotte's chest. "Thank you. That means more than you know." Their conversation was interrupted by the server's return with their appetizers, and Charlotte felt grateful for the brief respite. She had revealed more about her personal life than she had intended, drawn out by Bruce's genuine interest and understanding. "Tell me about Sterling Industries," she said, deliberately shifting the focus. "You mentioned some challenges earlier. How is the company doing?" Bruce's expression grew more complex. Better than it was a year ago, but we are still recovering from some significant setbacks. The supply chain disruptions during the pandemic hit us harder than many of our competitors. What kind of manufacturing do you focus on? Traditional industrial components. Mostly. Automotive parts, construction materials, basic infrastructure supplies. We have been in business for 40 years, but we have been slow to adapt to technological changes. Bruce's frustration was evident. My father built the company on personal relationships and proven methods. I've been trying to modernize without losing what made us successful in the first place. Charlotte felt her business instincts stir. That is always a difficult balance. What kind of technological changes are you considering? Supply chain management software, automated inventory systems, digital customer portals, the basics that most companies implemented years ago. Bruce's tone was self-deprecating. I am probably boring you with business details. Not at all. I find business problem-solving fascinating. There is something satisfying about finding elegant solutions to complex challenges. Most people's eyes glaze over when I start talking about operational efficiency. Then you have been talking to the wrong people. Charlotte's response was automatic, and she immediately realized she had revealed too much enthusiasm for business topics. I find it interesting to hear about different industries. A graphic design has its own operational challenges, though obviously on a much smaller scale. Bruce was studying her face with renewed interest. What kind of challenges? Client management, project scheduling, technology updates, competitive positioning, the usual small business concerns, all true, though Charlotte's experience with these issues had been on a vastly different scale. I imagine your challenges are similar, just with higher stakes. Much higher stakes. When you employ 300 people, every decision affects families and livelihoods. Bruce's expression grew serious. That is probably why I have been so conservative about changes. The fear of making things worse has made me hesitant to take necessary risks. Charlotte felt a surge of empathy. Leadership requires balancing caution with courage. The key is making sure you have good information before you make decisions. Easier said than done. I have been considering bringing in an outside consultant, but I am not sure I trust anyone else to understand our specific situation. What kind of consultant? Someone with experience in technology integration and operational efficiency. But the consulting firms I have looked at seem more interested in imposing generic solutions than understanding our unique needs. Charlotte felt her pulse quicken. This was exactly the kind of problem she had solved dozens of times in her previous life, the kind of challenge that had made DevTech solutions so successful. The urge to offer specific advice was almost overwhelming. Have you considered smaller, more specialized firms? Sometimes the best solutions come from people who have faced similar challenges themselves, rather than from large consulting companies. That is an interesting point. I've been focusing on the big names, assuming that reputation equals expertise. Reputation is important, but cultural fit and specific experience are often more valuable. You want someone who understands your industry and shares your values. Charlotte paused, realizing she was dangerously close to revealing too much knowledge, or so I would imagine anyway. Bruce's smile was warm and admiring. You have excellent instincts. Have you ever considered business consulting yourself? The question sent a jolt of panic through Charlotte. I think I am better suited to creative work. Business strategy requires a different kind of expertise. I am not so sure about that. Your insights tonight have been remarkably astute. Before Charlotte could respond, their main courses arrived, providing another welcome distraction. As they ate, the conversation shifted to lighter topics, books, movies, travel experiences, but Charlotte remained aware of Bruce's continued interest in her perspectives on business matters. "I have a confession," Bruce said as they finished their meals. "I did some research on you after you moved in." Charlotte's heart stopped. "Research? Nothing invasive," he added quickly, seeing her expression. "Just basic internet searches. I wanted to make sure you were who you claimed to be, for Ethan's sake as much as yours. That is understandable, I suppose. What did you find?" "A professional website for Khloe Martinez graphic design, a few client testimonials, some sample work, all very legitimate and well presented." Bruce's tone was casual, but Charlotte heard the underlying question. "Though I was surprised by how limited your online presence is. Most freelancers have more extensive social media profiles." Charlotte forced herself to remain calm. "I prefer to keep my personal and professional lives separate. Too much social media can be a distraction from actual work." "Fair point. I was impressed by your portfolio, though. The work shows sophisticated understanding of branding and marketing strategy." "Thank you. I try to approach each project strategically rather than just focusing on aesthetics." "It shows." "The campaign you designed for that small tech company was particularly clever." Charlotte felt another flutter of alarm. She had created that portfolio piece specifically to demonstrate relevant experience, but she had been careful to use fictional companies and generic industry references. "Which one?" "The cloud security startup." "The way you positioned their services showed deep understanding of both the technology and the market dynamics." The compliment was genuine, but Charlotte heard the curiosity beneath it. Bruce was clearly wondering how a freelance graphic designer had developed such sophisticated knowledge of the tech industry. "I research my clients' industries thoroughly," she said carefully. "You cannot create effective marketing materials without understanding the competitive landscape." "That is true, but the level of detail in your positioning documents suggested more than just research. You wrote about cloud security architecture and data protection protocols, as if you had direct experience with them." Charlotte felt the walls closing in. Her fictional portfolio had been designed to demonstrate competence, but she had apparently made it too convincing. "I may have gotten a bit carried away with the research. I find technology fascinating, and I tend to dive deep into subjects that interest me. Clearly, your analysis of market penetration strategies was particularly insightful." "Thank you," Charlotte said, hoping her voice sounded more casual than she felt. "I suppose I should be flattered that you studied my work so closely." "I am trying to understand you better," Bruce said simply. "There are layers to you that I find intriguing. Your confidence with Vivian, your business insights, your approach to design work. It all suggests someone with more experience than you claim to have." The direct observation hung in the air between them. Charlotte felt the familiar tension of maintaining her cover while being drawn toward honesty. Bruce was asking the right questions, making the right observations, and she was running out of ways to deflect without seeming evasive. "I suppose I have always been an overachiever," she said finally, "even in areas where I have no formal training." "That is one explanation," Bruce agreed, but his expression suggested he was not entirely satisfied with it. They finished dinner in comfortable conversation, but Charlotte remained aware of Bruce's continued interest in the contradictions he had observed. As they prepared to leave, she found herself both relieved and disappointed. The evening had been wonderful, but it had also highlighted the increasing difficulty of maintaining her deception. "Thank you for a lovely evening," she said as they reached his car. "I enjoyed talking with you." "The pleasure was entirely mine. I hope we can do this again soon." "I would like that." As Bruce drove her home, Charlotte stared out at the familiar neighborhoods and tried to process what had happened. She had successfully navigated another evening without revealing her true identity, but Bruce's questions were becoming more pointed and his observations more accurate. How long could she maintain the pretense before her carefully constructed cover began to unravel? The question would prove to be more urgent than she realized. 2 days later, Charlotte was working in her home office when her phone rang. Bruce's name appeared on the screen, and she felt the familiar flutter of anticipation mixed with caution. "Hello, Bruce." "Khloe, I hope I am not interrupting your work. I have a rather unusual request." "What kind of request?" "Sterling Industries is hosting a small business networking event next week. Local entrepreneurs, potential partners, that sort of thing. I was wondering if you might be interested in attending as my guest." Charlotte felt her stomach drop. A business networking event would be filled with exactly the kind of people who might recognize her, despite her physical transformation. "I am not sure I would fit in with that crowd." "Are you kidding? You would be perfect. I've been thinking about our conversation the other night, and I realized you have exactly the kind of perspective I need. Your insights into business strategy and technology integration were remarkably sophisticated. Bruce, I'm just a freelance graphic designer. I do not have the kind of experience." "That is where you are wrong," he interrupted gently. "You may not have formal business training, but you have something more valuable: practical intelligence and fresh perspective. I would value your observations about the people and ideas we encounter." Charlotte found herself trapped between her desire to help Bruce and the need to protect her cover. "I appreciate the confidence, but I am not sure I am ready for that kind of professional exposure." "What do you mean?" "I am still building my freelance business. I need to be careful about how I present myself professionally." All true, in a way, though for entirely different reasons than Bruce would assume. "I understand your caution, but this could be a good opportunity for you as well. Small businesses and startups are always looking for skilled designers, and your work is exceptional." The irony was almost painful. Charlotte had spent years building relationships with exactly the kind of companies that would be represented at such an event. But now she had to avoid them to maintain her anonymity. "Can I think about it?" she asked finally. "Of course. The event is next Thursday evening. Let me know by Monday if you are interested." After ending the call, Charlotte sat in her office chair and stared at her computer screen. The smart thing would be to decline Bruce's invitation to avoid any situation where she might be recognized, but she could hear the hope in his voice, could sense how much her support meant to him. She was still wrestling with the decision when Ethan arrived home from school, bursting through the front door with his usual 8-year-old energy. "Mom, guess what happened at school today?" "What happened, sweetheart?" "Tommy Miller's dad came to talk to our class about his job. He works for some big computer company, and he was telling us about how they make software that helps other companies work better." Ethan dropped his backpack by the door and headed for the kitchen. "It sounded just like the stuff you used to do before we moved here." Charlotte felt her blood turn to ice. "What do you mean?" "You know, when you had that big company with all the computers and the fancy office, before you decided to be a graphic designer instead." "Ethan, we have talked about this. I never had a big company. I have always been a freelance designer." Her son turned to look at her with the kind of patient expression usually reserved for adults who were being deliberately dense. "Mom, I am 8, not stupid. I remember the old house and all the people who used to work for you and the way everyone treated you like you were really important." Charlotte felt the walls of her carefully constructed new life beginning to crumble. "Ethan, those are just confused memories. Sometimes children—" "I remember the day you told me we were going to live like normal people for a while." You said it would be our secret, and that we were going to pretend to be different than we really were." Ethan's voice was matter-of-fact, but Charlotte could see the confusion in his eyes. "I thought it was kind of like a game, but it has been a really long time now." Charlotte sank into one of the kitchen chairs, realizing that her 8-year-old son had been playing along with her deception for months, assuming it was temporary. "Ethan, come sit with me. We need to talk." He climbed into the chair beside her, his expression serious. "Are we in trouble? Is that why we had to change our names and move away?" "No, sweetheart, we are not in trouble. I just wanted to give you a chance to have a normal childhood, away from all the complications of my work. But I liked our old life. I liked the big house, and I liked how proud you were of your company. And I especially liked how happy you were when you were working." The simple statement hit Charlotte like a physical blow. "I am happy now. You are happier than you were right after we moved, especially since you met Mr. Sterling. But you are not happy like you were when you were being yourself." Charlotte stared at her son, amazed by his perceptiveness and ashamed of her own assumptions. She had thought she was protecting him from the pressures of wealth and public attention, but she had never considered that he might miss the confidence and fulfillment she had found in her professional life. "What do you want to do, Ethan?" "I want you to be happy. If that means being Khloe Martinez forever, then I can do that. But if it means being Charlotte Devereaux again, that is okay too." He paused, his expression growing more serious. "I just want you to stop being scared all the time. I am not scared. You are scared that people will find out who you really are. You are scared that Mr. Sterling will not like you if he knows the truth. You are scared that if you go back to being yourself, something bad will happen." Charlotte felt tears prick her eyes. Her son had been watching her more closely than she had realized, and his 8-year-old wisdom was proving more accurate than her own adult reasoning. "You are right," she admitted. "I am scared, but sometimes being scared is the smart thing to do. Grandma Rosa used to say that being scared was okay, but letting fear make your decisions for you was not." Another reference to her grandmother, whose strength and wisdom had shaped so much of Charlotte's character. What else did Grandma Rosa say? That the people who really love you will love you no matter what. And that pretending to be someone else is exhausting. Charlotte pulled her son into a tight hug, overwhelmed by his maturity and insight. "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from watching you, the old you. I mean, the one who was not afraid of anything." As Charlotte held her son, she realized that her attempt to protect him had actually been robbing him of the mother he had known and loved. The confident, successful woman who had built an empire and commanded respect had been replaced by someone timid and fearful, always looking over her shoulder. "I have been invited to a business event next week," she said finally. "It would mean interacting with people who might recognize me. Are you going to go?" I was planning to say no. "Because you are scared." Charlotte pulled back to look at her son's face. "Because I am scared. Maybe it is time to stop being scared, Mom. Maybe it is time to be yourself again." As Charlotte considered his words, she felt something shift inside her chest. Perhaps it was time to stop running from her own success and start embracing the strength that had gotten her this far. Perhaps it was time to trust that Bruce's feelings for her were strong enough to survive the truth. The question was whether she had the courage to find out. The Sterling Industries office building was modest, but well-maintained, reflecting the company's practical approach to business. Charlotte stood in the parking lot, gathering her courage before the networking event that she had ultimately decided to attend. She had spent the morning preparing for the possibility of recognition, creating plausible explanations for her presence and ready responses to potential questions. But as she approached the entrance, Charlotte realized that her primary concern was not professional exposure. It was Bruce's reaction to seeing her in her natural element. For months, she had been careful to present herself as competent, but not extraordinary. Tonight, if challenged, she would have to reveal the depth of her business knowledge and experience. The lobby was filled with small groups of professionally dressed attendees, their conversations creating a familiar energy that Charlotte had not experienced in months. She found herself automatically scanning the room, assessing the crowd and identifying key players with the instincts that had made her successful in her previous life. "Khloe, you made it." Bruce appeared at her elbow, his expression warm with relief and pleasure. "I was beginning to worry you had changed your mind." "I almost did," she admitted, "but I realized I was being unnecessarily cautious." "I am glad you reconsidered. Come on, let me introduce you to a few people." For the next hour, Charlotte moved through the crowd with Bruce, meeting local business owners and entrepreneurs. She found herself falling into familiar patterns, asking insightful questions, making strategic observations, and connecting disparate ideas in ways that clearly impressed the people they encountered. "You have a remarkable understanding of market dynamics," commented Sarah Chen, who owned a small manufacturing company. "Have you worked in business development before?" "I have always been interested in how companies grow and adapt," Charlotte replied carefully. "It is fascinating to see how different industries approach similar challenges. Khloe has excellent instincts," Bruce added, his voice carrying a note of pride. "She has been helping me think through some of Sterling Industries' strategic challenges." Charlotte felt a flutter of panic. "I would hardly call it helping. We have just had a few conversations." "Those conversations have been more valuable than months of meetings with expensive consultants," Bruce insisted. "Your perspective on technology integration has been particularly insightful." Before Charlotte could respond, their conversation was interrupted by a tall man in an expensive suit who approached their group with the confident stride of someone accustomed to commanding attention. "Bruce Sterling, I have been looking for you all evening." Bruce's expression became more guarded. "Richard Thompson. I did not expect to see you here. I make it a point to attend these local events. You never know when you might discover hidden talent." Thompson's gaze shifted to Charlotte with interest. "And who might this be?" Charlotte felt her heart rate accelerate. Richard Thompson was the CEO of Thompson Dynamics, a major player in the tech industry who had been a competitor during her DevTech days. More importantly, he was exactly the kind of person who would recognize her despite her physical transformation. "This is my friend Khloe Martinez," Bruce said. "Khloe, Richard Thompson, CEO of Thompson Dynamics." Thompson extended his hand, and Charlotte had no choice but to shake it. "Miss Martinez, a pleasure. What brings you to our little gathering?" "I am Bruce's guest," Charlotte replied, keeping her voice steady. "I own a small graphic design business." "How interesting. And what is your take on the current state of the local business climate?" The question was clearly a test, and Charlotte realized that Thompson was assessing her with the same calculating intelligence that had made him successful in the tech world. She could give a safe, generic response, or she could demonstrate the expertise that was becoming increasingly difficult to hide. "I think there is tremendous opportunity for companies that can bridge the gap between traditional manufacturing and modern technology," she said finally. "The challenge is not just implementing new systems, but creating organizational cultures that can adapt to continuous change." Thompson's eyebrows rose slightly. "That is a remarkably sophisticated analysis. You must work with some very interesting clients." "I try to understand each client's broader strategic context," Charlotte replied, aware that Bruce was watching the exchange with growing curiosity. "Wise approach. The companies that survive and thrive are the ones that can evolve with their markets." Thompson paused, his gaze growing more intent. "You know, You remind me of someone. Have we met before? Charlotte felt the familiar spike of adrenaline that accompanied moments of potential exposure. I do not think so. I would certainly remember meeting you. Perhaps it is just one of those faces. Thompson's expression remained thoughtful. Bruce, you are fortunate to have such an insightful advisor. I hope you are taking advantage of her expertise. I am trying to, Bruce replied, though Charlotte could hear the questions in his voice. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the evening's keynote speaker, and Charlotte felt grateful for the distraction. As they found seats for the presentation, she remained hyper-aware of Thompson's continued interest and Bruce's growing curiosity about her background. The speaker was a venture capitalist, discussing trends in technology investment, and Charlotte found herself unconsciously analyzing his points with the kind of detailed knowledge that came from years of experience in the industry. When he mentioned cloud security as a growth sector, she had to suppress the urge to comment on specific market dynamics that she knew intimately. Interesting perspective on cloud security, Bruce murmured during a pause in the presentation. What do you think about his analysis? Charlotte realized that answering honestly would reveal far more knowledge than she should possess. He seems to understand the technical aspects, but I think he is underestimating the regulatory challenges. What kind of regulatory challenges? Data privacy, international compliance, sector-specific requirements. The technical solutions are often simpler than the legal and regulatory frameworks. Charlotte caught herself providing information that was too specific and too authoritative. Or so I would assume, anyway. Bruce's expression was growing more puzzled. You seem to know quite a bit about this industry for someone who works in graphic design. I have done some research. Technology companies can be good clients for design work. Have you worked with many tech companies? Charlotte felt trapped by her own expertise. A few small startups, mostly. Which ones? The direct question hung in the air between them. Charlotte could provide fictional names, but Bruce was clearly intelligent enough to verify her claims. She could also continue to deflect, but doing so would only increase his suspicions. I would rather not discuss specific clients, she said finally. Professional confidentiality. Bruce nodded, but Charlotte could see that her evasion had not satisfied his curiosity. As the presentation concluded, and the networking portion of the evening resumed, she found herself dreading the continuation of their conversation. Khloe, there you are. Richard Thompson appeared beside them again, his expression more intense than before. I have been thinking about our earlier conversation, and I believe I know why you seem familiar. Charlotte felt her carefully constructed world begin to tilt. I am sure it is just a coincidence. Perhaps, but I have an excellent memory for faces, especially faces associated with significant business achievements. Thompson's smile was sharp and calculating. Tell me, have you ever been involved in any major technology ventures? Cloud security, perhaps? The question was pointed enough to be a direct challenge. Charlotte could continue to deny recognition, but Thompson clearly had specific suspicions. She could also claim coincidental resemblance, but that would only delay the inevitable confrontation. I think you may be confusing me with someone else, she said carefully. Maybe, but the resemblance is quite remarkable. The bone structure, the way you carry yourself, the sophisticated analysis of market conditions. Thompson paused, his gaze never leaving her face. You would not happen to be related to Charlotte Devereaux, would you? Charlotte felt the blood drain from her face. The question was specific enough to make denial impossible, but acknowledging any connection would open doors she had spent months keeping closed. I do not think I know anyone by that name, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Thompson's smile became predatory. Charlotte Devereaux, founder and former CEO of DevTech Solutions, revolutionized cloud security architecture, sold her company for nearly $3 billion, then disappeared from public view about a year ago. He paused, watching her reaction. The resemblance is truly uncanny. Bruce was staring at Charlotte with an expression of growing shock and confusion. "Khloe, what is he talking about?" Charlotte felt the walls of her carefully constructed deception collapsing around her. She could continue to deny Thompson's accusations, but the truth was written in her panicked expression and Bruce's dawning recognition of the contradictions in her story. "I think," Thompson said, with obvious satisfaction, "that Ms. Martinez has been far too modest about her qualifications." As Charlotte stood frozen between her fake identity and her true self, she realized that the moment of reckoning she had been dreading for months had finally arrived. The question was whether she had the courage to face it with honesty, or whether she would retreat further into the deception that was destroying her chance at genuine happiness. The choice, she realized, was no longer hers to make. The silence that followed Thompson's observation stretched for what felt like hours, though it was probably only seconds. Charlotte could feel Bruce's eyes on her, could sense his confusion and growing suspicion, while Thompson watched the scene unfold with obvious satisfaction. "I think there has been a misunderstanding," Charlotte said finally, her voice steadier than she felt. "I am not sure why you think I resemble this person, but I assure you, actually," Thompson interrupted, pulling out his phone, "I think a simple search will clear this up." He began typing, his movements quick and efficient. Charlotte Devereaux, DevTech Solutions, founded in 2012, sold in early 2023 for $2.8 billion. Charlotte felt her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. She could see Bruce's expression changing from confusion to something approaching recognition, and she realized that her carefully maintained disguise was crumbling in real time. "Here we are," Thompson continued, turning his phone screen toward them. "Charlotte Devereaux, age 34, Harvard MBA, Forbes 40 under 40, and the photograph—" He paused, his smile becoming more pronounced. "Well, the photograph is quite revealing." Charlotte did not need to look at the screen to know what Bruce was seeing. The official DevTech Solutions website had featured professional photographs of her taken just months before the company's sale. Images that showed her with platinum blonde hair, 20 pounds heavier, and dressed in the kind of power suits that had become her signature. "The resemblance is striking," Thompson observed. "Though I must say, the new look suits you better, Charlotte. Much more approachable." Bruce was staring at the phone, then at Charlotte, then back at the phone. She could see the exact moment when recognition dawned, when the pieces of her carefully constructed deception finally fell into place. "Khloe," he said slowly, "what is this?" Charlotte felt the familiar surge of panic that had driven so many of her decisions over the past months. She could continue to deny the obvious, could claim coincidental resemblance, could even feign ignorance about the entire situation. But looking at Bruce's hurt and confused expression, she realized that the time for deception had passed. "My name is Charlotte," she said quietly. "Charlotte Devereaux." The admission hung in the air like a confession. Bruce's face went through several emotions in quick succession: surprise, hurt, confusion, and something that might have been betrayal. "You are the Charlotte Devereaux, the tech billionaire." "Yes. And you have been living next door to me for months, pretending to be a struggling freelance graphic designer." Charlotte felt tears prick her eyes. "It is more complicated than that." "Is it? Because it seems fairly straightforward from where I am standing. You lied to me." "About everything." "Not everything," Charlotte said desperately. "My feelings for you, my care for your happiness, my respect for who you are. None of that was a lie." Thompson was watching the exchange with obvious fascination. "I should probably leave you two to discuss this privately." "No," Bruce said sharply. "I think you should stay. I apparently do not know this woman at all, so perhaps you can fill in the details I have been missing." Charlotte felt the situation spinning out of control. "Bruce, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" "How you have been playing some kind of elaborate game with my life. How you have been pretending to be someone you are not, while I shared my problems and my feelings with you." The pain in his voice was devastating. Charlotte realized that her deception had not just hidden her identity, it had stolen his ability to trust his own judgment and feelings. "I never meant to hurt you," she said softly. "I just wanted to have a normal life, to be valued for who I am, rather than what I have accomplished." "But you did not give me the chance to make that choice," Bruce replied. "You decided for both of us what I could and could not handle." Thompson cleared his throat. "Perhaps I should mention that Charlotte's disappearance from the tech world has been the subject of considerable speculation. Some people assumed she was taking a sabbatical. Others thought she might be starting a new venture. No one suspected she was living in suburban anonymity." "Why?" Bruce asked, his attention returning to Charlotte. "Why disappear? Why create this elaborate deception?" Charlotte felt the weight of months of carefully guarded secrets. "Because I was exhausted, because the pressure was destroying me, because I wanted to give my son a normal childhood away from the spotlight." She paused, struggling to find words that would make him understand. "Because I thought if people knew who I really was, they would never see me as just a person." "So you decided to lie instead?" "I decided to protect myself and my son. The deception was supposed to be temporary." "How temporary?" Charlotte realized she did not have a good answer. The truth was that she had been living day to day, hoping that somehow she could maintain her dual identity indefinitely. "I do not know." Bruce's expression hardened. "You do not know. So you were just going to keep pretending forever, keep taking my help and my feelings while living a complete lie?" "It was not like that." "Then what was it like, Charlotte? Because from where I am standing, it looks like you used me for entertainment while you were playing house in suburbia." The accusation was unfair and painful, but Charlotte could see how he had reached that conclusion. From his perspective, she had been living a fantasy while he had been opening his heart to someone who did not really exist. "I fell in love with you," she said quietly. "That was never part of the plan." The admission seemed to hit Bruce like a physical blow. "You fell in love with me, or did Charlotte Devereaux, the billionaire CEO, fall in love with the idea of a simple life with a simple man? That is not fair." "Fair? You want to talk about fair?" Bruce's voice rose, drawing attention from nearby conversations. "You have been lying to me for months. You have let me worry about money in front of you, let me offer to pay for your things, let me feel protective of you, all while you are worth more than most small countries." Charlotte felt the devastating accuracy of his words. "I wanted to tell you. I almost did so many times. But you did not. You chose to keep lying, to keep playing your game." "It was not a game," Charlotte said desperately. "It was survival." "Survival?" Bruce's laugh was bitter. "You are one of the most successful people in the world. What exactly were you surviving?" "The pressure, the expectations, the constant scrutiny, the knowledge that everyone who approached me wanted something from me." Charlotte felt tears streaming down her face. "I just wanted to be normal. I wanted to be loved for who I am, not what I can provide. But you did not trust me enough to find out if I could love the real you." The statement hung between them like a verdict. Charlotte realized that her attempt to protect herself had actually guaranteed the outcome she had been trying to avoid. By hiding her true self, she had made it impossible for Bruce to love her authentically. "I was afraid," she admitted. "I was afraid you would leave if you knew the truth. So instead, you made sure I would leave when I found out about the lie." Charlotte felt the crushing weight of her own choices. "I am sorry. I am so sorry. I need to go," Bruce said abruptly. "I need to think about this." "Bruce, please." "No, Charlotte. I need space to process what you have told me. I need to figure out who you really are and what any of this means." As Bruce walked away, Charlotte felt her carefully constructed world collapse completely. She had spent months building a new life, developing genuine feelings for a good man and creating the possibility of real happiness. But her inability to trust, her fear of rejection, and her need to control the narrative had destroyed everything she had been trying to protect. Thompson was still standing beside her, his expression now showing something that might have been sympathy. "That did not go as well as you might have hoped." "No," Charlotte agreed, wiping tears from her face. "It did not. For what it is worth, I think you are both making this more complicated than it needs to be." Charlotte looked at him with surprise. "What do you mean?" "He is hurt because you lied, but he is also attracted to your strength and intelligence. You are afraid of being valued only for your wealth, but he fell for you when he thought you had none." Thompson paused. "The real question is whether either of you is brave enough to start over with complete honesty." As Charlotte considered his words, she realized that the choice she had been avoiding for months had finally been made for her. The deception was over, the secret was out, and the consequences were unfolding exactly as she had feared. The question now was whether she had the courage to fight for the relationship she had found, or whether she would retreat into the isolation that had driven her to deception in the first place. Charlotte sat in her car in the Sterling Industries parking lot for 20 minutes after Bruce left, trying to process what had just happened. The confrontation she had dreaded for months was over, but instead of relief, she felt only a hollow emptiness where her carefully constructed life had been. Finally, she started the engine and drove home in a daze. The familiar streets of her neighborhood looked different now, as if her exposure had changed the very landscape of her existence. When she pulled into her driveway, she could see Bruce's house next door, dark and silent, and wondered if he was inside trying to make sense of everything she had revealed. Ethan was waiting for her in the living room, curled up on the couch with a book and a glass of milk. He looked up as she entered, and she saw immediate concern in his 8-year-old eyes. "Mum, what is wrong? You look like you have been crying." Charlotte sank into the chair across from him, suddenly exhausted. "I told someone the truth about who we are." "Mr. Sterling." "Yes." And he was angry. He was hurt and confused, and probably angry too. Charlotte rubbed her eyes, trying to ease the headache that had been building since Thompson's recognition. "I think I made a terrible mistake, Ethan. The mistake was telling him the truth, or the mistake was lying in the first place." Once again, her son's clarity cut through her confusion with devastating accuracy. The mistake was lying in the first place. "So what are you going to do now?" Charlotte realized she had no idea. "I do not know. He said he needed time to think, to figure out who I really am." "Do you know who you really are?" The question was simple, but Charlotte found herself struggling to answer. For months, she had been living as Khloe Martinez, playing a role that had become increasingly comfortable. But Charlotte Devereaux felt like a stranger now, someone from a previous life who bore little resemblance to the woman she had become. "I used to know," she said finally. "I used to be Charlotte Devereaux, the CEO who built a technology empire, but I do not know if that person exists anymore." "Maybe she does not have to exist anymore. Maybe you can be someone new." "What do you mean?" "Maybe you can be Charlotte Devereaux, who lives in a normal house and has a normal life, but still knows all the smart business stuff. Maybe you can be both people at the same time." Charlotte stared at her son, amazed by his ability to see solutions where she saw only problems. "You think I can combine both parts of myself? I think you have been doing that already. You have been happier these past few months than you were before we moved, but you have also been scared all the time. Maybe if you stop being scared, you can keep the happy parts and add back the confident parts. What if Bruce cannot accept all of those parts? Then maybe he is not the right person for you, but maybe he is, and you just need to give him time to understand." Charlotte felt a flicker of hope for the first time since the disastrous evening. "When did you become so wise?" "I learned from watching you figure things out. The old you was really good at solving problems. Maybe the new you can be good at solving different kinds of problems." As Charlotte tucked Ethan into bed later that evening, she found herself thinking about his words. Perhaps the solution was not choosing between her old identity and her new one, but finding a way to integrate the best aspects of both. Perhaps she could be successful and powerful while also being approachable and genuine. The question was whether Bruce would be willing to discover who that integrated person might be. She was still pondering that question when her phone buzzed with a text message. Her heart leapt when she saw Bruce's name, but the message was brief and formal. "I need a few days to process everything. Please give me some space." Charlotte typed and deleted several responses before finally settling on, "I understand. I'm sorry for the deception, and I hope you can forgive me eventually." His response came quickly. "I do not know what forgiveness looks like yet, but I appreciate your honesty now." It was not the response she had hoped for, but it was not a complete rejection either. Charlotte decided to take it as a sign that there might still be hope for salvaging their relationship. Over the next 3 days, she found herself in a strange limbo. She continued her freelance design work, but with less enthusiasm than before. She took care of Ethan and maintained their household routines, but her heart was not fully present. Most of all, she watched Bruce's house for signs of activity, hoping for glimpses of him that might give her clues about his state of mind. On the 3rd day, she saw him in his driveway as she was leaving to pick up Ethan from school. He looked tired and somewhat disheveled, as if he had been sleeping poorly. When he saw her, he raised his hand in a brief wave, but made no move to approach her. Charlotte felt a surge of longing mixed with regret. She wanted to talk to him, to explain her motivations more clearly, to find out if there was any possibility of rebuilding what they had lost. But she also knew that pushing him before he was ready would only make things worse. That evening, after Ethan was in bed, Charlotte made a decision that she hoped would demonstrate her commitment to honesty. She opened her laptop and began writing a letter. Not an email, but an actual letter that she could print and deliver by hand. "Dear Bruce," she began, then stopped. How could she possibly explain months of deception in a way that would make him understand her motivations without excusing her choices? She started again. "I know that you need time to process what you learned about me, and I respect that. But I also know that I owe you a more complete explanation than I was able to give in the shock of the moment." For the next 2 hours, Charlotte wrote about her reasons for leaving her old life, her fears about Ethan's safety and well-being, her exhaustion from years of constant pressure and scrutiny. She wrote about her grandmother's neighborhood and her hope that she could find peace in a simpler life. She wrote about meeting him and the unexpected joy of being valued for her character rather than her achievements. Most importantly, she wrote about her growing feelings for him and her terror that those feelings would disappear if he knew the truth about her wealth and success. "I realize now that by trying to protect our relationship, I actually destroyed the foundation it was built on," she wrote. "Trust requires honesty, and I was too afraid to be honest. I was too afraid to find out if you could love the real me." She ended the letter with a simple request. I do not expect forgiveness, and I do not expect you to want to continue what we started. But I hope you can understand that every moment we shared was real for me, even if the context was false. The woman who fell in love with you was not Khloe Martinez, the freelance designer. She was Charlotte Devereaux, learning to be human again. Charlotte read the letter 3 times, making small edits and additions. When she was finally satisfied, she printed it on simple stationery and sealed it in an envelope. Tomorrow, she would leave it in his mailbox and hope that it would help him understand the complexity of her choices. As she prepared for bed, Charlotte felt a strange sense of peace. She had told the truth, faced the consequences, and done what she could to repair the damage. The outcome was no longer in her control. And for the first time in months, she found that acceptance liberating. Whatever happened next, she would face it as her authentic self, not the perfect CEO she had been, not the fearful refugee she had become, but the complicated, flawed, hopeful woman she was learning to be. The question was whether that woman would be enough for the man she had grown to love. A week after Charlotte left her letter in Bruce's mailbox, she received his response. It was brief, formal, and written on Sterling Industries letterhead. Thank you for your explanation. I understand your motivations better now, though I still need time to process everything. I hope you can respect my need for space while I figure out what this means for both of us. Charlotte read the note 3 times, searching for clues about his emotional state. The professional tone was discouraging, but the fact that he had responded at all seemed hopeful. She decided to take his request for space seriously, even though every instinct urged her to seek him out and continue the conversation. The following Monday morning, Charlotte was working in her home office when she heard familiar voices in the front yard. Through her window, she could see Bruce talking with Ethan, who had apparently intercepted him on his way to work. Her son was gesturing animatedly, clearly engaged in serious conversation, while Bruce listened with the patient attention she had always appreciated about him. Charlotte felt a mixture of affection and anxiety. Ethan had been increasingly concerned about the tension between his mother and their neighbor, and she suspected he had taken it upon himself to intervene. At 8 years old, he possessed a directness that adults often lacked, and she wondered what he might be saying to Bruce about their situation. After 10 minutes, Bruce glanced toward her house, and Charlotte stepped back from the window, not wanting to appear to be eavesdropping. A few minutes later, Ethan burst through the front door with his usual energy. "Mom, I talked to Mr. Sterling about everything." Charlotte felt her heart sink. "Ethan, what did you say to him?" "I told him that you have been really sad since you told him the truth and that you missed talking to him. I also told him that you are still the same person you were before, just with a different name and more money. Sweetheart, you cannot interfere in adult relationships. Bruce and I need to work this out ourselves." "I know, but I think adults make things too complicated sometimes. You like each other. You are both good people and you both want the same things. I do not understand why the money part makes everything so hard." Charlotte sat down beside her son, struck by his simple logic. Sometimes when people have been hurt, they need time to heal before they can trust again. I hurt Bruce by lying to him, and now he needs to decide if he can forgive me. But you lied because you were scared, not because you wanted to hurt him. That is different. You are right, but Bruce has to figure that out for himself. We cannot force him to forgive me just because we want him to. Ethan was quiet for a moment, clearly processing this information. "He asked me about you, about what you were like before we moved here." "What did you tell him?" "I told him that you used to be really confident and happy when you were working, that you were good at solving problems and helping people, and that you were sad for a long time after you sold your company, but you started getting happier after we moved here." Ethan looked at her seriously. I also told him that you were happiest when you were talking to him. Charlotte felt tears prick her eyes. What did he say? He said that he missed talking to you too, and that he was not angry anymore, just confused about how to move forward. The information gave Charlotte more hope than she had felt in days. If Bruce was no longer angry, if he missed their connection, perhaps there was still a chance for them to rebuild something meaningful. Did he say anything else? He said that he admired how much you love me, and that he thought you were brave for starting over even though it was hard. Ethan paused, and he said that he hoped you could still be friends, even if everything else was complicated. Charlotte felt her heart constrict. Friends. It was not the romantic relationship she had hoped for, but it was better than the complete estrangement she had feared. Perhaps friendship could be a foundation for something more, or perhaps it would have to be enough. I think I would like that, she said finally, to be friends with him again. Good, because I think he needs friends who are smart and kind and understand about business stuff. And I think you need friends who make you laugh and bring out your confidence. Once again, Charlotte was amazed by her son's perceptiveness. You are absolutely right. Maybe we can all be friends. I would like that too. I missed having him around. That afternoon, Charlotte made a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. She opened her laptop and began updating her professional website, replacing the fictional Khloe Martinez portfolio with her real credentials and experience. If she was going to rebuild her life with honesty as the foundation, she needed to stop hiding from her own accomplishments. She spent hours crafting a new professional biography that acknowledged her previous success while emphasizing her current availability for consulting and strategic advisory work. She included testimonials from former colleagues and clients, detailed case studies of her most successful projects, and a clear statement about her current focus on helping small and medium-sized businesses navigate technological change. When she finished, Charlotte stared at the screen for a long time before clicking publish. The website represented a complete abandonment of her attempt to live anonymously. Anyone who searched for her now would find not just her DevTech Solutions history, but also her current location and availability. It was a risk, but it was also a statement of intent. She was no longer hiding from who she was or what she had accomplished. She was Charlotte Devereaux, and she was ready to build a future based on authenticity rather than deception. The next morning, Charlotte woke to find an envelope slipped under her front door. Her name was written on the outside in Bruce's distinctive handwriting, and her heart raced as she opened it. Charlotte, the letter began. I want to thank you for the honesty in your letter, and I want to apologize for the harshness of my initial reaction. I was hurt and confused, and I said things that were unfair. I have spent the past week thinking about our relationship and what it means to me, and I have reached some conclusions I would like to share with you. Charlotte's hands shook as she continued reading. First, I want you to know that I do not regret the time we spent together. Every conversation, every shared moment, every growing feeling was real and meaningful to me. The fact that you were not entirely honest about your background does not invalidate the connection we developed or the person I came to care about. Second, I want you to know that I understand why you felt the need to protect yourself and Ethan. I cannot imagine the pressure you must have faced in your previous life, or the difficulty of trying to provide your son with a normal childhood while managing such extraordinary circumstances. Your desire for privacy and authenticity makes complete sense, even if your methods were imperfect. Third, I want you to know that I am not intimidated by your success or your wealth. I am, however, deeply impressed by your intelligence, your strength, and your dedication to your son. These are the qualities that attracted me to you in the first place, and learning about your professional accomplishments only increases my admiration. Finally, I want you to know that I would like to explore the possibility of rebuilding our relationship on a foundation of complete honesty. I do not know what that looks like yet, but I am willing to find out if you are. The letter was signed simply, Bruce. Charlotte read it 3 times, her emotions cycling through relief, hope, and gratitude. Bruce was not just offering forgiveness, he was offering a chance to start over with full knowledge of who she really was. She spent the next hour composing her response, trying to strike the right balance between gratitude and caution. She did not want to assume too much or push too hard, but she also wanted him to know how much his letter meant to her. "Dear Bruce," she wrote, "thank you for your generous and thoughtful letter. I am grateful for your understanding and your willingness to consider moving forward together. I would very much like to rebuild our relationship on a foundation of honesty, and I am committed to complete transparency going forward. I hope we can take this slowly and discover what is possible between us as our authentic selves." She delivered the letter to his mailbox before she could second-guess herself, then spent the rest of the day trying to focus on work while fighting the urge to watch his house for signs of activity. That evening, as she was preparing dinner, Charlotte heard a knock at her front door. When she opened it, she found Bruce standing on her porch, looking nervous but determined. "Hello, Charlotte," he said, and she noticed how he used her real name with deliberate care. "Hello, Bruce. Would you like to come in?" "I would like that very much." As she led him into her living room, Charlotte felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. This was their first real conversation as honest equals, and she had no idea what to expect. "I was hoping we could talk," Bruce said, settling into the chair across from her. "About what comes next." "I would like that too," Charlotte replied, and realized that for the first time in months, she felt genuinely hopeful about the future. Whatever came next, they would face it together, as the people they really were. 2 weeks later, Charlotte was reviewing quarterly reports when her phone rang. Bruce's name appeared on the screen, and she felt the familiar flutter of anticipation that had returned to their interactions. "Good morning, Bruce." "Good morning, Charlotte. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Just some financial planning. Nothing that cannot wait." She smiled at how natural it felt to be honest about her activities. "What can I do for you?" "I have a business proposition I would like to discuss with you. Are you available to meet this afternoon?" Charlotte felt her interest spark. Since their reconciliation, she and Bruce had been carefully rebuilding their personal relationship, but they had not discussed professional matters. "What kind of proposition?" "The kind that requires your expertise as Charlotte Devereaux, not your kindness as my neighbor. I would prefer to discuss it in person if you are amenable." "I am intrigued. Shall I come to your office?" "Actually, I was hoping we could meet somewhere neutral. How about the coffee shop on Main Street, 2 o'clock? "Perfect. I will see you there." Charlotte spent the next few hours speculating about Bruce's proposal. She had noticed increased activity at Sterling Industries over the past weeks, and she wondered if he was finally ready to implement some of the technological changes they had discussed. The coffee shop was busy with the usual afternoon crowd, but Charlotte spotted Bruce immediately. He was sitting at a corner table with a folder in front of him, and his expression was serious but hopeful. "Thank you for meeting me," he said as she joined him. "I know this is somewhat unconventional. I'm curious about what you have in mind." Bruce opened the folder and pulled out several documents. "Sterling Industries is at a crossroads. We have an opportunity to acquire a smaller competitor, but the integration would require significant technological upgrades and operational changes. I need someone with your expertise to help evaluate the opportunity and, if we proceed, to oversee the implementation. Charlotte felt her pulse quicken. You want to hire me as a consultant? I want to hire you as a strategic advisor, full engagement, significant responsibility, appropriate compensation. Bruce's expression was earnest. I am not asking because we have a personal relationship. I'm asking because you are the best person for the job. Bruce, I appreciate the confidence, but are you sure this is wise? Mixing business with personal relationships can be complicated. Everything about our relationship has been complicated, he replied with a slight smile. But I have thought about this extensively, and I believe we can maintain professional boundaries while exploring our personal connection. Charlotte studied the documents he had spread across the table. The acquisition target was a manufacturing company with outdated systems and inefficient processes, exactly the kind of challenge she had tackled dozens of times in her previous career. What is your timeline? She asked. Due diligence needs to be completed within 6 weeks. If we proceed, implementation would begin immediately afterward. And you want me to lead the evaluation process? I want you to lead the entire project, evaluation, planning, implementation, and ongoing optimization, full authority to make necessary changes. Charlotte felt excitement building in her chest. That is a significant responsibility. It is. But I have seen what you can do when you are operating at full capacity. I watched you at the networking event, saw how you analyzed problems and identified solutions. I need that kind of thinking applied to this opportunity. What about the personal side of our relationship? We keep it separate. During business hours, you are my strategic advisor. Outside of work, we continue exploring what we mean to each other. Bruce's expression grew more serious. I know it is not a conventional arrangement, but nothing about our relationship has been conventional. Charlotte found herself nodding. It would be good to work on something meaningful again. I have missed the intellectual challenge. Does that mean you are interested? I am very interested, but I have conditions. Name them. First, full transparency about my recommendations, even if they are difficult to hear. Second, complete authority to implement necessary changes without interference. Third, honest communication about any conflicts between our professional and personal relationships. Bruce extended his hand across the table. Deal. Charlotte shook his hand, feeling the familiar thrill of embarking on a new business venture. When do I start? How about tomorrow morning? I can have all the relevant documents prepared by then. Tomorrow morning it is. As they walked to the parking lot together, Charlotte felt energized in a way she had not experienced in months. The prospect of applying her skills to a real business challenge, of working alongside Bruce as an equal partner, filled her with anticipation. Are you sure about this? She asked as they reached her car. It could change everything between us. I am counting on it changing everything, Bruce replied. I fell in love with your mind before I knew about your accomplishments. Now I want to see what we can build together when we are both operating at full capacity. Charlotte felt her heart skip. You fell in love with my mind? Among other things. Your intelligence, your strength, your dedication to your son, your ability to see solutions where others see problems. Bruce's expression was tender. I fell in love with Charlotte Devereaux before I knew that was your name. I love you too, Charlotte said simply. All of you. The successful CEO, the caring neighbor, the man who makes me want to be my best self. Then let us see what our best selves can accomplish together. As Charlotte drove home, she felt more optimistic about the future than she had in years. She was about to embark on a challenging business project with a man who respected her abilities and cared about her as a person. She was going to be able to use her skills in service of something meaningful while building a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine affection. For the first time since selling DevTech solutions, Charlotte felt like she was exactly where she belonged. 3 months later, Charlotte stood in the Sterling Industries conference room, reviewing the final integration reports with a sense of deep satisfaction. The acquisition had been completed successfully. The technological upgrades were ahead of schedule, and the combined companies were already showing improved efficiency and profitability. "These numbers are remarkable," said Margaret Davidson, who had joined the Sterling Industries board as an independent director. "The integration has exceeded every projection." "Charlotte's strategic planning made all the difference," Bruce replied, his voice carrying unmistakable pride. "She anticipated problems we had not even considered and created solutions that improved both companies simultaneously." Charlotte felt a familiar flutter of pleasure at his recognition. Over the past months, she had thrown herself into the project with an intensity that reminded her why she had loved building DevTech solutions. The difference was that now she was working with someone who valued her contributions and shared her vision for sustainable growth. "The real test will be long-term performance," Charlotte said, though she was privately confident in their results. "But the foundation is solid, and the team is well positioned for continued success." "Speaking of the team," Bruce said, "I have an announcement to make." He stood and moved to the head of the table, his expression serious but pleased. "Effective immediately, I am offering Charlotte Devereaux the position of Chief Operating Officer of Sterling Industries." Charlotte felt her heart stop. "Bruce, we never discussed." "I know, but I have been thinking about this for weeks, and I believe it is the right decision for the company." He turned to address the entire room. "Charlotte has proven herself to be an exceptional strategic thinker and operational leader. More importantly, she shares our values and our commitment to treating employees with respect and dignity." Margaret Davidson was nodding enthusiastically. "I think it is an excellent proposal. Charlotte's track record speaks for itself." "What do you say?" Bruce asked, his attention returning to Charlotte. "Are you interested in staying on permanently?" Charlotte felt the familiar thrill of a new challenge mixed with something deeper, the recognition that she could build a meaningful career alongside someone who truly understood her capabilities. "I am interested," she said carefully. "But I have questions about how this would work." "Ask away. What about our personal relationship? How do we manage potential conflicts of interest?" "The same way we have been managing them for the past 3 months. Professional boundaries during business hours, personal connection outside of work." Bruce's expression was serious. "I will not lie. It is complicated. But I think we have proven that we can make it work." "What about decision-making authority, chain of command? As COO, you would have full operational authority. Strategic decisions would be made jointly, with final approval resting with me as CEO." Bruce paused. "But I cannot imagine making any major decisions without your input." Charlotte found herself smiling. "In that case, I accept." The room erupted in applause, and Charlotte felt a surge of excitement about the future. She was about to embark on a new phase of her career with someone who respected her abilities and supported her vision. As the meeting concluded and the other attendees filed out, Bruce approached her with a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. "I was hoping you would say yes," he said, opening the bottle with practiced ease. "I thought we should celebrate properly." "This is quite a development," Charlotte said, accepting the glass he offered. 6 months ago, I was hiding from my own success. Now I am the COO of a manufacturing company. 6 months ago, I was a lonely divorced man who had given up on meaningful relationships. Now I am in love with the most remarkable woman I have ever met." Bruce raised his glass. "To new beginnings?" "To new beginnings," Charlotte agreed, clinking her glass against his. As they sipped the champagne, Charlotte felt the satisfaction of having found her place in the world again. She was successful, challenged, and respected. She was also in love with a man who saw her as an equal partner rather than a prize to be won. "I have to ask," she said, setting down her glass. "Are you sure about mixing business with pleasure? It could get messy." "I am sure about you," Bruce replied simply. "Everything else we will figure out as we go." Charlotte felt her heart swell with affection and confidence. "I love you, Bruce Sterling." "I love you too, Charlotte Devereaux, all of you. The brilliant strategist, the devoted mother, the woman who makes me want to be better than I thought possible." As they stood together in the conference room, surrounded by the evidence of their successful collaboration, Charlotte realized that she had found something she had never expected, a partnership that honored both her professional capabilities and her personal desires. The future was full of possibilities, and for the first time in years, Charlotte was excited to explore them all. 1 year later, Charlotte stood before the bathroom mirror in her townhouse, applying lipstick with the careful precision of someone preparing for an important evening. The face looking back at her was confident and content, bearing little resemblance to the fearful woman who had moved to Westfield Heights 2 years earlier. "Mom, your phone is ringing," Ethan called from the hallway. "Can you see who it is?" Charlotte called back, securing an earring. "It is Mr. Sterling. I mean, Bruce." Ethan had gradually transitioned to using Bruce's first name as their relationship had evolved from neighborly to something more integrated. "Should I answer it?" "Please." Charlotte could hear Ethan's side of the conversation from the bathroom. "Hello, Bruce." "Yes, she is almost ready." "No, she is not nervous, but she keeps checking her hair." "Okay, I will tell her." "What did he say?" Charlotte asked as Ethan appeared in the doorway. "He said the car will be here in 10 minutes, and that you should not worry about your hair, because you look beautiful." Ethan's expression grew more serious. He also said that tonight is going to be special, and that he hopes you are ready for surprises. Charlotte felt a flutter of anticipation. "What kind of surprises?" "He would not tell me, but he had that look he gets when he's planning something important." The something important Bruce had been planning was the annual Sterling Industries Gala, an event that had grown significantly in scope and prestige over the past year. Under Charlotte's operational leadership, the company had expanded into new markets and attracted attention from major industry publications. Tonight's event would showcase their success while raising funds for the Children's Hospital Foundation. "How do I look?" Charlotte asked, turning to face her son. "You look like yourself, the confident, happy version of yourself." Ethan's observation was characteristically direct, the version that is not afraid of anything. Charlotte smiled, recognizing the truth in his words. Over the past year, she had indeed become a version of herself that integrated the best aspects of her previous and current identities. She was successful and powerful, but also approachable and genuine. She was a devoted mother and a skilled executive, a strategic thinker and a caring partner. "Thank you, sweetheart." "That is exactly what I was hoping for." The car arrived precisely on time, and Charlotte found Bruce waiting in the back seat, looking exceptionally handsome in his tailored tuxedo. His expression when he saw her was everything she could have hoped for: admiration, affection, and something deeper that made her pulse quicken. "You are stunning," he said, taking her hand as she settled beside him. "You clean up pretty well yourself," Charlotte replied, though her attention was caught by something in his manner. He seemed nervous, almost excited, in a way that suggested Ethan had been right about surprises. "Are you ready for tonight?" Bruce asked, as the car pulled away from her house. "I think so. The final preparations went smoothly, and the guest list is impressive. I think we will exceed our fundraising goals." "I am sure we will." "But that is not what I meant." Bruce's hand tightened on hers. "Are you ready for whatever tonight might bring?" Charlotte studied his face, noting the mix of anticipation and nervousness in his expression. "Bruce, what are you planning?" "You will see, but I hope you know that this past year has been the most fulfilling of my life, both professionally and personally. It has been wonderful for me too. I feel like I have found my place in the world again." "Good. Because I have some thoughts about our future that I would like to share with you." Before Charlotte could respond, the car pulled up to the hotel, and Bruce's attention was immediately claimed by the event logistics. Charlotte found herself swept into the familiar rhythm of a high-profile charity event, but she remained aware of Bruce's unusual energy and the promise of surprises to come. The gala was a tremendous success. Charlotte moved through the crowd with natural grace, discussing Sterling Industries' growth with potential investors and partners, while maintaining her focus on the evening's charitable mission. She was in her element, confident and capable, fully herself for the first time in years. "You are remarkable," Margaret Davidson commented as they watched the auction proceedings. "I have never seen someone handle both business and social responsibilities with such skill." "Thank you. I am enjoying myself more than I expected." "It shows. You and Bruce make an excellent team." Charlotte felt a warm glow of satisfaction. "We do work well together. I think you complement each other perfectly. He provides stability and integrity, while you bring innovation and strategic vision. It is a powerful combination." As the evening progressed, Charlotte found herself thinking about Margaret's words. She and Bruce did complement each other, both professionally and personally. They had built something meaningful together, something that honored both of their strengths and ambitions. The realization filled her with a deep sense of contentment and anticipation for whatever the future might hold. Near the end of the evening, as the last auction items were being presented, Bruce approached Charlotte with an expression of barely contained excitement. "I need to steal you away for a moment," he said, taking her hand. "There is something I want to show you." Charlotte allowed him to lead her through the crowd and out onto the hotel's terrace, where the city lights created a romantic backdrop. The noise of the party faded behind them, leaving them alone in the cool evening air. "Bruce, what is this about?" Charlotte asked, though she was beginning to suspect. "This is about the future," Bruce said, turning to face her fully. "About what we have built together and what we might build going forward." Charlotte felt her heart begin to race. "What do you mean?" "I mean that this past year has shown me what is possible when two people trust each other completely. We have created something remarkable together, both professionally and personally." Bruce's voice was steady, but Charlotte could see the emotion in his eyes. "I love you, Charlotte. I love your intelligence, your strength, your dedication to your son, and your ability to see possibilities where others see obstacles." "I love you too," Charlotte replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know. And I know that we have built something worth protecting and nurturing." Bruce reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "Which is why I want to ask you something important." Charlotte's breath caught as Bruce dropped to one knee, opening the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring that caught the light from the terrace lamps. "Charlotte Elizabeth Devereaux," he said, his voice filled with love and certainty, "will you marry me?" Charlotte felt tears spring to her eyes as she looked down at the man who had become her partner in every sense of the word. "Bruce, are you sure? Marriage is a big step, and we have so many complications. I have never been more sure of anything in my life," Bruce interrupted gently. "I want to build a life with you." I want to be a father to Ethan, a partner in all of your endeavors, and your husband in every way that matters." Charlotte felt her heart overflow with love and gratitude. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and clear. "Yes, I will marry you." Bruce slipped the ring onto her finger and stood to kiss her, and Charlotte felt the satisfying click of everything in her life falling into place. She was successful, fulfilled, and deeply loved. She had found her place in the world and the person she wanted to share it with. As they returned to the party, Charlotte caught sight of their reflection in the terrace doors. They looked like equals, like partners, like two people who had found their perfect match. The scared, isolated woman who had hidden in suburban anonymity was gone, replaced by someone confident enough to embrace both love and success. The future stretched ahead of them, full of possibilities and challenges they would face together. Charlotte had never felt more ready for whatever might come. 6 months later, Charlotte stood in her new office at Sterling Industries, reviewing the quarterly reports that showed continued growth and profitability. The integration of the acquired company had been even more successful than projected, and Sterling Industries was now considered a model for modernizing traditional manufacturing. "Mrs. Sterling," her assistant called from the doorway, "your 3 o'clock appointment is here." Charlotte smiled at the title she was still getting used to. She and Bruce had married 3 months earlier in a small ceremony that included only their closest friends and family. Ethan had served as ring-bearer, his pride evident as he watched his mother marry the man who had become his stepfather in every way that mattered. "Please send him in," Charlotte replied, looking up from her reports. The door opened to admit Bruce, who had clearly come directly from his own office. He was carrying a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses, his expression serious but pleased. "Do you have a few minutes for your husband?" he asked, settling into the chair across from her desk. "For you, I always have time. What is the occasion?" Bruce set the glasses on her desk and opened the whiskey with practiced ease. "I just got off the phone with the board of directors. They have approved the expansion proposal." Charlotte felt a surge of excitement. All of it. All of it. The new facilities, the technology upgrades, the additional staff. They were unanimously impressed by your strategic plan. Charlotte felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The expansion would position Sterling Industries as a major player in the industry while creating hundreds of new jobs and maintaining their commitment to employee welfare. "That is wonderful news," she said, accepting the glass he offered. "I am proud of what we have accomplished." "I am proud of what you have accomplished," Bruce corrected. "This expansion is your vision, your strategy, your leadership. I just provided the platform." "We did this together," Charlotte insisted. "Your experience, your relationships, your commitment to the company's values, none of this would have been possible without your foundation." Bruce smiled, the expression warm and admiring. "I suppose we make a good team." "The best team," Charlotte agreed. "Professionally and personally." "Speaking of personally," Bruce said, his expression growing more serious, "I have something else to discuss with you." Charlotte felt a flutter of curiosity. "What is it?" "Ethan came to see me yesterday. He wanted to talk about the possibility of me adopting him officially." Charlotte felt her heart constrict with emotion. "What did you tell him?" "I told him that I would be honored to be his father in every legal sense, if that is what he wants and if you approve." Charlotte felt tears prick her eyes. "Bruce, are you sure? Adoption is a permanent commitment." "I have been his father in every way that matters since we got married. I love him like my own son, and I want to make that relationship official." Bruce's voice was filled with conviction. "I want us to be a complete family." Charlotte felt overwhelmed by love and gratitude. "I would love that, and I know Ethan would too." "Good. I will start the paperwork this week." Bruce raised his glass, and Charlotte did the same. "To the future," he said, "to our family, our business, and whatever challenges we face together." "To partnership," Charlotte replied, clinking her glass against his. "In all things." As they sipped the whiskey, Charlotte reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. 2 years ago, she had been a frightened woman hiding from her own success. Now she was a confident executive, a loving wife, and a mother in a family that had been built on mutual respect and genuine affection. "I have one more surprise," Bruce said, setting down his glass. "I have been thinking about our 5-year plan for the company. What about it? I think it is time to consider going public. With your track record and our growth trajectory, I think Sterling Industries could be a very attractive IPO candidate." Charlotte felt excitement building in her chest. That is a significant step. "Are you sure you are ready for that level of scrutiny and responsibility?" "I'm sure I'm ready to build something extraordinary with you," Bruce replied, "whatever form that takes." Charlotte felt her heart swell with love and anticipation. "Then let us build something extraordinary." As they sat together in her office, surrounded by the evidence of their successful partnership, Charlotte realized that she had found everything she had been searching for. She was successful, challenged, and deeply loved. She had a family that supported her ambitions and a career that fulfilled her deepest aspirations. Most importantly, she had found someone who saw her as an equal partner in all aspects of life. The future was full of possibilities, and Charlotte was ready to explore them all with the man she loved by her side. The scared, isolated woman who had hidden in suburban anonymity was gone forever, replaced by someone confident enough to embrace both love and success without apology. Charlotte Devereaux Sterling had finally found her place in the world, and she intended to make the most of it. "Partners?" Bruce asked, raising his glass one final time. "Partners," Charlotte replied, her voice filled with love and certainty. "In everything." As they touched glasses in a final toast, Charlotte felt the satisfying completeness of a life well lived and a future full of promise. She had found her equal, her partner, and her perfect match. The rest was just the beginning. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.